There was a concept of materialism right through the early scientific revolution, right through Newton. Newton still accepted it. In fact, the great scientists of the next century accepted it. You know, Lagrange, others kept trying to develop a material, mechanistic concept of the universe that went right through the 19th century, ether theories and so on. It was finally given up in the 20th century, you know, finally recognized, look, we're never going to get it. And totally different ways of looking at things were developed, which have no relation to traditional materialism. Friedrich Lange is correct. And nobody's ever suggested another notion. Materialism just is like anything we more or less understand. It includes thinking, it includes reasoning, and so on and so forth. Locke's suggestion. So we can't leave it behind unless someone tells it what it is. But there's no reason why we can't study it. I mean, we can study what the human capacity of understanding is. In fact, we know some things about it. We know some negative things. For example, we can't understand the way the world works because our concept of understanding is too limited to incorporate what Newton described as an absurdity. You know, people like Newton and Hume and Locke were not idiots. We have to take them seriously. They regarded it as an absurdity for very good reasons. And modern cognitive science, which somehow tries to recapitulate some of this, finds pretty much that. So, as I mentioned, an infant presented with presentations which indicate that there's some kind of causality, like, you know, when the ball rolls this way, light turns red or something. They will invent a mechanical cause. And they don't care if it's not visible because infants understand that most of what goes on is invisible. You know, but there's got to be some mechanical cause, otherwise no way for it to influence anything else. So that does seem to be the way our minds work. And that tells us something about the limits of our understanding. In fact, a classical, crucial case. And it can go on to other cases. And we can study it directly. In principle, we can study it directly. It's not simple. I mean, it's not easy to understand why a rat can't deal with a prime number maze. Even that's hard. I mean, we have good evidence that it's true, but why it's true is unclear. There's nothing known about the brains of rats that explains why they can't do that. In fact, we can't explain why, the tiniest organism that's seriously studied, C. elegans, nematodes, 800 cells, 300 neurons, entire wiring diagram known. There have been years of study trying to explain why this thing, it goes left instead of right, let's say. It's just, we don't know how to explain that. There's an answer, but these are hard scientific questions. When you talk about how human intelligence works, it's incomparably more difficult. So you can ask the questions, you can, you know, cut away at them, but we shouldn't exaggerate. It's kind of striking that, going back to what philosophy ought to do, philosophers often appear to intend to want to get answers about humans that we can't get about insects. And that's too much, you know. Science sort of works at the edges of understanding, and it faces hard questions all the way. So we can sort of talk about it, but if you want to seriously work on it, you have to take a look at what is understood and try to see if you can formulate questions which can be investigated and will tell us more about what's understood. Actually, there's interesting work going on this, having to do with things like the human moral instinct. In the past 20, 30 years, that's become an experimental subject with interesting experimental work on probably universal moral principles. A very important book just came out a couple of weeks ago by John Michael. He's a philosopher who now teaches law at Georgetown University, who gives a very acute. He more or less initiated this modern study. He didn't publish much, but other people have drawn off his work. Combination of reanalysis of traditional moral philosophy, mainly Rawls and his antecedents, and an analysis of a lot of the critique of Rawls, and then on to developing experimental programs to investigate some of these questions. And it's feasible. maybe we can get some insight into innate human and moral concepts that are cross-cultural, like you're going to find them in every culture, and that you can find with young children, pre any serious cultural impact. Those are all things that can be studied, and there's beginnings of studies.